Go get on the bed and lie down. Take a nap. Good boy. Hi guys, I'm Amy. Welcome back to my channel. Today I have a reading wrap up for all of you that definitely has a very strong theme running through it. I have 6 books to chat about, 2 of which don't really fit into these themes, so we'll chat about those first. But if you guys are interested in the books that I've read recently, then go ahead and keep on watching. So the first book I'm going to chat about is a book that I picked up and decided to read because this author will be coming to my local library, which does not happen very often. We usually don't get a lot of authors at my library. And that is Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. Loki's gonna help me talk about this book apparently. And this is a post-apocalyptic story in which the main storyline, you are following a troupe of actors and musicians about 15 years after a horrible pandemic wiped out a large majority of the world's population. And now there's no electricity, and it's a post-apocalyptic world in which a lot of resources are no longer available to people. But they travel around mostly the Midwest in the United States, putting on concerts and plays. And their tagline, I believe, is something along the lines of survival is inefficient, which I really enjoyed. There are 2 other timelines, one 15 years prior to the pandemic wiping out most of the population, in which we follow an actor named Arthur, and another during the pandemic when it first begins, in which we mostly follow a gentleman learning to be a paramedic and his experiences. And a lot of people really love this book. This was a National Book Award finalist, so it's very well lauded, but I didn't love it. I didn't dislike it, but I never really connected with any of these characters. There was only one character in which he comes, or his story is more involved in the latter half of this book, that I enjoyed a lot. His name is Clark. I'm not going to go into who he is or how he's connected with everybody, because I think you should discover that as a reader. But I had lukewarm reactions to it. It was fine enough, but not great, which is sometimes my least favorite reaction to have to a book. But I think I still plan on going to the event because I'd like to hear her chat about her books and her experiences. And I also have the Lola Quartet, also written by her, that I'm hoping to read before then. But just a meh reaction. The next book that I have to share with you is a book that I have read before, but it was over 10 years ago. I believe I was 15 when I read this book, and I hated it then. I've made no secret of the fact that I did not like it the first time I read it, or the other work by this author that I had read and disliked even more than this one. And that is Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck. I loved it. I loved this book, novella, whatever you want to call it, because it is very teeny, immensely. Steinbeck's prose is phenomenal, and that was completely lost on me at the age of 15. But I've done a lot of growing and learning and all of those things in the past 10+ years, but this is a beautiful book. The narrative that Steinbeck packs into this 107 pages or whatever it is incredible. This is about George and Lenny. For those of you who may not know, they are companions who are traveling around trying to find work. And Lenny looks like an adult. He's a very large man, but does not have the mental capacity of an adult. And George watches out for him and just basically takes care of him. And this is their story when they show up at a particular ranch to work. And it's beautiful. It's tear-jerking. I got so much mascara on the inside of my glasses, but it's really an incredible book. And I remember the ending of this, but it still just punches you right in the gut. And if you have any recommendations for where I should go next with Steinbeck, please let me know, because I'm about as stunned as the rest of you. Now onto the books that have the very strong and not so subtle theme of feminism and women and our experiences and how society treats women and everything under that umbrella. And the first of which is a poetry collection, and that is The Witch Doesn't Burn in this one by Amanda Lovelace. And she is, of course, the author of The Princess Saves Herself in this one, which I have to say I enjoyed more than this one, but I read that book a while ago, over a year ago, and the last year I've done a lot of growing as a reader and really honed in on the type of things I enjoy reading, and this just wasn't it. And I have to be honest, and I'm not saying this is a wrong feeling or emotion to have. The poems and the tone of this book is very angry, and rightfully so, and justifiably so, but that doesn't happen to be an emotion that I connect with very well. And there are some poems in here that I did enjoy. There's one that references Wonder Woman, which I really got a kick out of, but for the most part, I found it in some ways to be hypocritical and exclusive while trying to be inclusive, and I struggled with that a bit. If you enjoy this type of poetry, I definitely think you should check it out. Her voice is very strong, and I do appreciate that. I just happen to not connect with her voice, and that's okay. I dog-eared a lot and wrote some notes and things, but it was a quick read. It's a poetry collection, but I probably won't be picking up more of her works in the future. Now, on to 3 books that I enjoyed very, very much, that also fit under this umbrella of feminism and women and experiences. Let me be redundant and say that again. So the first of which is a YA book, which was one of my most anticipated reads of the year. This is a book that I pre-ordered and it did not disappoint, and that is The Lady's Guide to Petticoats and Piracy by Mackenzie Lee. Of course, the sequel to The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue, which I read earlier this summer and absolutely adored and loved and gushed about. How it's just a barrel of fun, that book. And this book really isn't any different. I am not at all disappointed in this book. There's really nothing about this book that I was like, oh, it wasn't like this with Monty. But it's Felicity's tale. It's Monty's sister, and she starts, basically the premise of this book is Felicity is hoping to find a school or a doctor who will accept her as a woman to train her in medicine, to be a doctor, not a midwife, not to work with herbs or that kind of thing. She wants to be a licensed doctor, and we follow Felicity as she tries to make that happen. And of course, there's adventures and travels. There's a Saint Bernard named Max, and it was so much fun. It's just as good as The Gentleman's Guide in my opinion, although I didn't really totally know what to expect going into Gentleman's Guide, so I loved the surprise of that, but I can't fault this for expecting that and going into it and finding it to have that. This book is about women trying to make ways for themselves in the world in which the world doesn't want to allow that to happen. Of course, this is a piece of historical work, but what I really loved about it is I follow Mackenzie Lee on social media, and I really feel like Felicity's struggles and mantras and things that she tells herself and tries to work through are really a reflection of what Mackenzie herself struggles with, and I think a lot of people struggle with, both men and women, telling yourselves that you deserve to take up space in the world, and I loved that so much. But this book is also about female friendship and positive female friendships and how sticky they can be sometimes, but I think what I loved the most about this book is this book talks about the fact that feminism and strong women don't come in one type. There is a huge range of people. I can be feminist and wear my dark lipstick and put on makeup and wear a dress and put on heels, and that doesn't make me any less strong than a woman who decides to do none of those things. And that discussion in this book was wonderful. Lee, she knocked it out of the park again, you guys. She talks about topics, such intense, hard, difficult topics in a wonderful way and executes it perfectly. And it's fun. It's so fun. I loved it. It's great. I hope she continues to write. I'm sure she will. I know she is. Can I gush more? It's great. Go read it. It's great. Even if you don't read YA, you need to read these books because they are that great. Now, the next feminist read that I picked up was going to be feminist just by the cover itself, and because I know about this book, and this was one of the most anticipated releases of this year. I'm a little bit behind and to getting to it because I think it was released in January or February, at the very, very beginning of the year. But it's been a big book on BookTube regardless, and that is Red Clots by Lenny Zumas. This is a story about 4 women who have very different lives and how their lives interact and intersect, and it all takes place in Oregon, on a coastal town, a small coastal town, in which the United States has passed the Personhood Amendment Act, in which the second conception happens, that fetus, that egg and sperm, have rights. So abortion is illegal, IVF is illegal, single women can no longer adopt children, or single people can no longer adopt children. And that is the backdrop of this book. And we follow these 4 women, like I mentioned, the first of which is referred to as the biographer in her section. And she is a teacher at the local high school. And she is trying to have a baby at the age of about 40 on her own. The second character that we follow is the daughter, who is a student of the biographer, and she's 15 years old and very quickly finds out that she is pregnant herself. Then there is the third character, which is the mender, which is a woman who is estranged from society because she chooses to be so, but she is very well versed in the ways of the natural world, and women come to her for solutions to problems with babies or menstruation, or they just use her as a resource because they cannot get a lot of those resources now. Legally. And the last of which is referred to as the wife, and she's married to a teacher at the high school and has 2 young children and is just really struggling. And what I loved about this book is the fact that in each of these sections, the woman in which you are following that woman's perspective, Zumas refers to that person by their label as their defining thing. The wife made dinner. The mender fed her goats. And that was very, very impactful for me. And this story is very, very beautifully written. The way these characters' lives intersect is very subtly and beautifully done, that it seems real. It doesn't seem contrived. And I think that's so difficult to do in books like this, to make it seem like it would just naturally happen that way. And I enjoyed each of these characters immensely. The tone changes, the way the writing is changes within the perspectives, which is just another indication of how well this book is written. I really, really love this book, and I understand why people think this book so highly of this book, because it very successfully approaches really, really hard topics for something that doesn't seem so far-fetched, that something like this could happen in our country. And I do have to say there are a few symbolic things that I didn't quite grasp, and that frustrated me a little bit. There's this instance with dirt, and there was another thing, but I can't seem to think of it right now, that I didn't quite piece it together perfectly. That's okay though. If you guys want to talk about those things, please let me know, because I would like to filter through those things, because I will want to grasp this book fully, and I don't feel like I've quite done that yet, although I think I'm close. Regardless, this book is worth the hype. It's worth the read, and it is very, very important for the day and age that we live in, and it gives 4 very different perspectives to what it means to be a woman, and the different struggles that we have, and the same struggles we have, and how we interact with each other. So if you've even thought about picking it up, I think you should, because it's good. It's really good. And the last book I have to share with you is a book that I've literally heard not a single other human talk about. And the reason that I found it is because I was at Barnes & Noble with a gift card, and it was on, I think, the new releases page, excuse me. And this cover 100% drew me in. And of course I read the blurb and was like, I'm taking this home. Because first of all, this cover is gorgeous, but it was very interesting to read a book in which I had no expectations of whatsoever, because I didn't hear anybody say anything about it. And that is What Should Be Wild by Julia Fine. First of all, this cover is probably one of the most beautiful book covers I've ever seen. It's stunning, and once you've read the book, it just makes so much sense why it looks the way it does. But essentially the main plot of this book is you are following Maisie, who's about 16 for most of this story, and she has a very, very interesting ability in which if her skin touches your skin in any way, if you are alive, you will die, and if you are dead, you will come back to life. And that includes her walking on grass barefoot. She will kill the grass. That includes her picking up a tomato and it will start to grow again, even though it's been picked. So that concept in and of itself was so interesting. But Maisie is from a very, very, very long lineage of cursed women who have all been in this particular area where Maisie lives, in this manor house or some version of a home being there, in which there are several women throughout her ancestry that have gone into the woods and disappeared, never to be seen again. And you also get to hear the stories of these 5 women. And this book is largely about the expectations that society puts on women in the different points of history, and through the different societies that change, because I think it goes all the way back to, because there's a family tree, and this book is just gorgeously published, you guys, to 1591 all the way to 1990, which is when Maisie is born. So this book is taking place in the early 2000s for the crux of it. And Maisie's living with her father, who is trying to learn as much as he can about her and treats her more like a subject than a daughter. And all of this kind of is brought to a head when Maisie's father goes missing and she decides to go and find him. But this book, I enjoyed reading so much. I loved the reading experience of this. If I could like encapsulate this book in one quick phrase, you'll need a little bit of context for it, but this is a Great and Terrible Beauty by Libba Bray for adults. It's an adult book with a very strong feminist slant, but it is so good. There are a few aspects to this plot that I didn't think were needed, and the plot would have been just as strong without these certain things that happen, especially in the latter half of the book. But this is a debut novel, and you can see bits of the debut novel in it. There are things that are left undone, but I don't hate that part of it. But my enjoyment of this book, has been one of the most of all the books that I've read this year. But I do acknowledge the fact that it has some faults, but I would love for other people to read this, because there's a lot about blood in here and what that means with the lineage and to be a woman and what blood means to a woman and our experiences. And it's just, it really, really is a fascinating, fascinating book. And I will most definitely be checking out more books from Fine in the future, because she has a mind that I want to know more of. But if this even intrigues you slightly, please read it and then come talk to me about it, because like I said, I haven't heard anybody talking about it, and this book, it hooked me. It sunk its little teeth into me and it hasn't let go. So go read it, please. Alrighty guys, there you have it. There is another reading wrap up with lots and lots of feminist books, which is really, really wonderful. Oh, and another thing I should mention, this book, kind of random, this is the time to be reading this book. It's creepy and atmospheric and dark and very, very, the writing, I enjoyed her writing a lot. So just a little snippet. Apparently I can't stop talking about this book. Anyway, but if you guys have read any of these books, let me know what your thoughts were. If you have any advice for where to go with Steinbeck next, please let me know. If you want to talk about all the feminist books or other really good feminist books out there, my phone is beeping, please leave all that down in the comments below. But if you guys like this video, please like it. And if you loved it, please subscribe. And we'll see you in my next video. Happy reading!